Okay, GOS, Grand Operational Simulation Series, version 1.7. Going through the rules line by line. I like a lot of what I've seen so far, so this should be a lot of fun to see some of this stuff in action. Movement. Players move their units during the friendly movement and exploitation phases. Displacement due to combat is not considered movement. Movement terms. Movement allowance. The basic MA of a unit is printed on its counter in the lower right corner. That's traditional. Units are not required to expend their entire MA, but unused MPs cannot be saved for use in later phases or transferred to other units. A unit's MA will sometimes be reduced or increased due to conditions imposed upon the unit. Exception. The MA for units in PA mode is expressed in hexes, not MPs, and is not printed on the unit counter. A unit's MA is the maximum number of movement points it may expend in a single phase, unless it is in a MR bonus period or using strat road movement. Exception. A unit in exploit mode has its basic MA halved during an AM or PM exploitation phase. During a night GT game turn or ENA extended night activity period, it uses its full MA during any one exploitation phase. Movement points. All unit movement uses MPs to measure how far a unit may be moved. A running total of a unit's expended MP is kept as the unit is moved from hex to hex. A unit cannot enter a hex if this MP total would exceed the unit's MA for that phase. That's a nice, clear and crisp explanation and way of putting it. Exception. Minimum movement and PA movement. Expending MPs. The MP cost to enter a hex depends on the movement class of the unit being moved and the terrain in the hex being entered, the hex side being crossed, enemy units in adjacent hexes. MP costs to enter a hex are listed on the movement terrain effects chart. Hex side terrain and the cost of moving adjacent to enemy units are added to the cost of terrain in the hex. Use the most expensive hex and hex side terrain MP cost based on the unit's movement class to enter a hex, unless some form of road movement is being used. Minimum movement. A unit may always move one hex regardless of MP cost as long as it does not violate rules 734A. What's that about? 734A, 735. I'm going to look real quickly. 734A movement and forts. .735 movement and fortified area hexes. Okay, so that's what that's about. It does not move into a prohibited hex or cross a prohibited hex site. Exception. Due to lack of fuel, mech units may not be able to move even one hex. Okay. Movement class. Each unit in the game is characterized by being in one of two movement classes. Leg units are generally slower and represent units moving on foot. Mechanized units move faster on roads and open terrain and represent units riding in vehicles, tracked, wheeled, and horse-drawn. Each unit's type determines whether it is leg or mechanized unit for movement purposes. See the unit type chart, UTC. A unit's movement class determines which column of the MP costs on the tech it uses and determines what the terrain cost in MPs must be expended. Leg units can become MUs by use of truck points. Okay, so they can become mechanized units. Makes sense. Mech units can dismount, that is, leave their vehicles and become leg units. Nice. Leaders may use mech and or leg class MP costs in the same phase. Note, all units that are not leg units are mechanized units. Movement type. 4 types of movement can be used. Strategic movement, road only, tactical road movement, tactical non-road movement, and prepared assault or PA movement. With the exception of leaders, a unit can only use one type of movement per phase. Movement of units can be limited by a number of factors including unit mode, enemy units, and terrain and scenario rules. Designer note: do not confuse unit mode with movement type. Units in tactical mode can move using strat movement, road movement, and non-road movement. Units in exploit mode can use tactical road movement and tactical non-road movement. Movement procedure. Units are moved individually. Their path of movement traced through contiguous hexes on the map. Skipping hexes is not allowed. Some combinations of units are treated as a single unit for movement purposes. This process requires a unit to expend MPs from its MA. A unit must stop moving once it has either exhausted its MA or encountered a condition requiring a movement halt. A player is not required to move a unit up to its full MA. Unless scenario rules state otherwise, there is no limit as to how many friendly units may move through a single hex or hex side during a movement phase. Movement eligible. What's key there, I think, is basically units are moved individually. During a movement eligibility, during a friendly movement phase, the active player may move any number of his units. Units in combat reserve, CR, exploit mode, and maneuver reserve, MR mode, or those units conducting construction may not move. During exploitation phases, only units in exploit mode may move. Movement order. Movement order is determined by the type of movement being used and the mode of the unit. Units follow a strict order of movement. Units in tactical mode, strategic movement, tactical road movement, tactical non-road movement. Units in PA mode. Okay, during an exploitation phase, only friendly units in exploit mode may move. Use the same order as above. Okay. Units in exploit mode may not use strat movement. That makes sense, actually. So here we have example. The diagram shows a hybrid unit. Oh, a hybrid unit A right there. Since it is using strat movement, it moves first. It moves 3 hexes. Units using strat movement must use road movement. So 1, 2, 3. Next, unit B here moves along the road using tactical road movement to move 2 hexes, 1 and 2. Unit C then uses tactical non-road movement to move 2 hexes, 1, 2. Finally, unit D moves 1 hex in PA mode, here to here. MA modifications. Certain conditions or events may impede, stop, or increase the movement of a unit. Units cannot enter hexes containing enemy units, exception when conducting overrun movement during the exploitation phase. Reduced MA. A unit's printed MA may be reduced due to certain conditions or events in the game. Fractions are always rounded up. MA and fuel. The printed MA of mech units is reduced when a formation is in a low or no fuel status. The reduced MA is the MA used when implementing such and such rules. MA halved. Oh, that is so when implementing these 2 rules, MA halved and MA quartered. Okay, so the reduced MA is the MA used when halving and quartering. Okay, unit's MA is halved if it is out of supply, marked with a fatigue 1 marker out of or OOC, or is moving during an AM or PM exploitation phase. MA quartered. A unit's MA is quartered if the unit is marked with a fatigue 2 marker, or if any 2 or more halving conditions in this rule affect the unit. A unit's MA is never reduced below a quarter of its base MA due to the conditions listed in here and here. MA and ground conditions. Adverse ground conditions will also reduce a unit's MA. After all modifications noted in the 7.3.1a 7.3.1a through 7.3.1 C. Are taken into account. Adjustments in a unit's MA are made for adverse ground conditions. 19.4.0. Note, some conditions increase or decrease the MP cost of certain types of terrain. Scenario rules may further reduce the ability of a unit to conduct movement. Example, a mech formation is in a low fuel status. The formation rules is 6 on the fuel level table, resulting in a 6. The player could move 6 units of the formation their full MA, or move all MUs of the formation a maximum of 6 MP. The player chooses to move all MUs a maximum of 6 movement points. Current ground condition is mud. All units of the formation are in tactical mode. No units are adjacent to or observed by enemy units. The first unit the player wishes to move is an in-battery SPA unit with a printed MA of 6. Since the unit's printed MA does not exceed the MA result on the fuel level table, the unit retains its printed MA. The player decides to move the unit along a primary road. All units using tactical road movement move before units using tactical non-road movement. Checking the movement terrain effects table, the player determines that a MA moving on a primary road in tactical mode pay 1/2 MP per hex. Thus the unit may move up to 12 hexes along a primary road. Mud condition does not affect units moving along a primary or secondary road. The second unit of the formation that the player wishes to move is a MA of 12 in tactical mode, currently in a clear terrain hex, and will use non-road movement. The unit's base MA is 6 due to low fuel DR and due to mud ground conditions using non-road movement. The unit's MA is halved. Thus the unit has 3 MP for this movement phase. The player wishes to move the unit into a forest hex. MP cost for a MU is 4. Normally the unit could not move into the forest hex. However, due to the minimum move rule, it may move 1 hex. The unit enters the forest hex, completing its move for that phase. A third unit is a leg unit, MA6, attached to the mech formation. Leg units are not affected by low fuel, so the unit retains its printed MA of 6. The unit is under a fatigue 2 marker, and the player wishes to move the leg unit into a hex not along a road. The leg unit's modified MA is 1. 6 divided by 4 for a fatigue 2 marker equals 1.5, rounded up to 2 divided by 2 for mud conditions equals 1. Again, the minimum move rule can be used to allow the unit to move 1 hex, no matter the cost of the terrain or the presence of enemy units. Movement during night game turns. A unit moving at night must pay an extra 1 MP for each hex that is entered, unless it is using road movement along a secondary or primary road, or is a leg unit moving along any type of road. Movement increase. A unit's basic MA is increased, fractions are rounded upward, if the unit is using strat movement, or the unit is in a maneuver reserve bonus period. Leaders can increase a unit's MA. Not all of these increases are cumulative, with the exception of strat movement. Example, formation enters exploit mode during the exploitation phase. The formation leader is active. The player rolls on the fuel and level table, rolling a 6 on the out of reserve line. Each unit is awarded a +3 to its movement allowance, and another +1 due to its active formation leader being stacked with the formation headquarters. A unit of that formation with a printed MA of 12 would have 8 movement points. 8 + 3 + 1 divided by 2 equals 8 to expend during this exploitation phase.